Before the rest of America wakes up, before commuters start their engines and coffee shops unlock their doors, a different kind of morning begins behind reinforced concrete walls and razor wire. There is no sunrise to admire here. No gentle alarm. No sense of choice. Inside a U.S. maximum security prison, the day does not begin when you open your eyes. It begins when the system decides you exist. The sound comes first. Not a voice, not footsteps, but metal. Steel doors shifting in their frames. Keys grinding into locks that have been turned thousands of times before. A low mechanical echo travels down the tier, bouncing off concrete and cinder block, filling every cell at once. It is impossible to ignore. Even inmates who haven't slept know what it means. Morning count is coming. In maximum security prison, count is not a formality. It is the foundation of control. Officers do not ask who is present. They do not rely on paperwork or cameras alone. They require visual confirmation, a human body standing in a specific place, at a specific time, under specific lighting conditions. Miscount, move wrong, cover your face, or fail to respond correctly, and the consequences ripple through the entire unit. Lockdowns, searches, loss of privileges. In some facilities, force. This is how the prison reminds everyone of a single truth. The institution owns time itself. From the outside, many people imagine prison control as loud, violent, and chaotic. They picture shouting guards, constant fights, emergency alarms, and sudden eruptions of force. But maximum security prisons do not function on chaos. They function on precision. They are designed to reduce life to a predictable loop, a closed system where every hour looks similar to the last, and deviation is treated as a threat. Here, control is quiet. It's in the way lights turn on and off whether you are ready or not. It's in the way meals appear and disappear through slots cut into steel doors. It's in the way movement is granted, escorted, logged, and revoked. Nothing happens by accident inside a maximum security prison. Every routine, every delay, every rule exists for a reason. And that reason is almost never explained to the people living under it. Isolation is not just physical. It is psychological. Cells are designed to limit sensory input. Colors are muted. Surfaces are hard. Windows, if they exist at all, are narrow and positioned to prevent inmates from seeing beyond the immediate perimeter. Sound travels strangely here, sometimes echoing, sometimes vanishing entirely. Silence is common, but never comforting. Silence means compliance. Silence means nothing is wrong. Silence means the system is working. Days begin early, but they do not move quickly. Time inside a maximum security prison stretches and compresses in ways that are difficult to describe unless you've lived it. Minutes crawl. Hours drag. Yet weeks vanish. Years disappear. Men enter convinced they'll remember every detail of their sentence, only to look back and realize entire seasons are gone without memory. The routine never changes, and that is the point. Wake-up count. Breakfast. Controlled movement. Work details or cell confinement. Midday count. Limited recreation, if permitted. Dinner. Final count. Lights out. The structure appears simple, but it is relentless. The predictability is not meant to comfort. It is meant to condition. Over time, inmates stop asking what time it is. They stop planning ahead. They stop thinking in terms of days or weeks and start thinking in terms of the next count, the next meal, the next door opening. Choice slowly disappears. In maximum security facilities, privileges are never guaranteed. Phone calls, visits, recreation time, commissary access. All of it can be adjusted, restricted, or removed entirely based on behavior, classification level, or administrative decisions. Often, inmates are not told why changes happen. They are simply told that rules have been updated, privileges suspended, or movement restricted until further notice. That uncertainty is not a flaw in the system. It is a feature. When inmates don't know what will trigger punishment, they begin policing themselves. They speak less, move less, react less. Control becomes internal, not external. Guards do not need to raise their voices when the environment itself does the work for them. And this is where maximum security prisons differ from almost every other institution in American life. Control here is not enforced through constant force. It is enforced through design. Architecture, schedules, lighting, sound, and routine all work together to shape behavior over time. Violence is not the primary tool. Predictability is. For many inmates, the most difficult part of life inside isn't fear, it's monotony. The sameness of every day. The realization that today will look almost identical to yesterday, and tomorrow will offer no real variation. The human mind is not built for that kind of repetition, and over time, it takes a toll. Some inmates mark time by meals, others by count, some by the sound of carts rolling down the tier. Many stop marking time altogether. Outside, people often ask what prison is really like. They want stories, incidents, extreme moments. But the truth is far less dramatic and far more unsettling. Most of prison life happens in the quiet spaces between events, in the waiting, in the rules that seem small but stack endlessly, in the knowledge that no matter how well you behave, you are always being watched. Cameras line the corridors. Officers log movements. Doors open and close electronically. Even when no one is visible, the system is present. Inmates learn quickly that privacy does not exist here. Not physically, not mentally, not emotionally. This is not about punishment alone. It is about management. Maximum security prisons are built to handle people considered dangerous, disruptive, or unmanageable elsewhere. But to do that, the institution must eliminate unpredictability. And the only way to do that consistently is to control everything. When you wake, when you eat, when you speak, when you move, and when you sleep. By the time lights go out at night, most inmates are exhausted, not from physical labor, but from compliance, from thinking before every action, from calculating every word, from existing inside a system where every detail of daily life is decided by someone else. And tomorrow, it will begin again, exactly the same way. This documentary is not about myths, rumors, or exaggerated stories. It is about the real, documented structure of daily life inside a U.S. maximum security prison. How control works, why isolation is used, and what happens to people when routine replaces freedom for years at a time. This is life inside one of America's most controlled and isolated facilities. Before we begin, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of the prison system. Now let's step inside. Morning inside a U.S. maximum security prison does not begin with light. It begins with verification. Long before sunrise reaches the outer perimeter fences, officers are already moving through the facility. Not quickly, not loudly. Their pace is deliberate, almost ritualistic. This is not a rush to wake inmates. It is a process designed to confirm control. Every morning starts with the same priority, making sure every body assigned to the building is exactly where the system expects it to be. This is called count, and in maximum security prison, count is sacred. At a designated time, often before 6 a.m., cell lights snap on across the unit. Not gradually, not softly. 1 second the tier is dark, the next it is fully illuminated. For inmates, this moment is unavoidable. Sleep does not matter. Exhaustion does not matter. If your body is not visible, count is not complete. In many facilities, inmates are required to stand at the front of their cells, facing the door, with their identification number clearly visible or verbally confirmed. Some prisons require inmates to place their hands in a specific position. Others require their faces to be unobstructed. The exact rules vary by institution, but the principle never changes. You must present yourself on demand. Count is not about safety alone. Cameras exist. Logs exist. Movement records exist. Count exists because human verification reinforces authority. An officer seeing you, and you responding, is a reminder that the system is watching, and that compliance is non-negotiable. If count is delayed, the entire unit feels it. A single inmate moving too slowly, covering his face, refusing to stand properly, or failing to respond can trigger consequences that affect hundreds of people. Lockdowns are common. Movement is canceled. Meals are delayed or served cold. Recreation is reduced or removed. Inmates learn quickly that individual resistance rarely harms the system. It harms everyone around them. That pressure is intentional. Maximum security prisons rely heavily on collective accountability, even when they publicly deny it. When one person causes disruption, everyone pays. Over time, inmates begin enforcing rules on each other. They remind each other to stand up, to show their faces, to keep quiet. The system doesn't need to shout when peer pressure does the work. Once count is complete, the day technically begins, but freedom does not. In many maximum security units, inmates remain locked in their cells for hours after morning count. Breakfast, when it comes, is often delivered through a narrow slot cut into the steel door. A tray slides in. The slot closes. No conversation. No eye contact. The meal is eaten alone, under fluorescent lighting, surrounded by concrete. Food in maximum security prison is not designed to be satisfying. It is designed to be adequate. Enough calories to function. Enough nutrients to avoid liability. Taste is secondary. Variety is rare. Predictability is constant. For inmates assigned to work details, kitchen, laundry, maintenance, cleaning crews, movement may come later in the morning. But movement is never casual. Doors open in sequence. Inmates are cuffed. Escorts are assigned. Routes are predetermined. Every step is logged. Even walking down a hallway requires permission. For inmates not assigned to jobs, the cell becomes the world. Hours pass with little to do. Some read. Some write. Some pace the limited space. Others lie on their bunks staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the unit. Doors opening, carts rolling, distant voices, radios crackling. Time inside a maximum security prison does not feel like time outside. Without control over schedule, the brain loses its natural rhythm. Days blur together. Weeks pass without landmarks. Birthdays, holidays, seasons, all become abstract concepts instead of lived experiences. This disorientation is not accidental. Psychologists who have studied long-term incarceration consistently note that loss of temporal control is one of the most damaging aspects of prison life. When people cannot decide when to wake, eat, move, or sleep, their sense of autonomy erodes. Decision-making weakens. Motivation declines. Compliance becomes easier. That is why count happens multiple times per day. Morning count establishes authority. Midday count reinforces it. Evening count confirms it. Final count locks it in. The system does not allow long periods without verification. The goal is constant awareness. Inmates should always know that at any moment, they may be required to present themselves again. And every count carries risk. If numbers don't match records, the response is immediate. Cells are searched. Units are locked down. Inmates are restrained. In extreme cases, emergency response teams are deployed. Not because violence has occurred, but because uncertainty is unacceptable in a maximum security environment. Control thrives on certainty. By mid-morning, the prison is fully awake, but not alive in the way people imagine. There is no bustle, no spontaneity. Movement happens in controlled bursts, followed by long periods of stillness. Noise rises briefly, then falls away. The building breathes in a pattern dictated by policy. For inmates, this rhythm becomes internalized. Many can tell time without clocks simply by listening. They recognize the sound of carts before meals, the timing of announcements, the pattern of door releases. Over years, the schedule imprints itself on the mind. And this is where the deeper control begins. When inmates start measuring their lives in counts instead of hours, the system has succeeded. When they think in terms of after count instead of later today, independence fades. The institution becomes the reference point for everything. Even emotions adapt. Excitement becomes dangerous, it draws attention. Anger becomes risky, it invites consequences. Joy becomes muted. Expression becomes measured. Over time, emotional flatness replaces reaction. It's safer to feel less than to feel too much. Morning count is not just a head count. It is a psychological reset. A daily reminder that no matter what happened yesterday, no matter what plans exist for the future, today begins on the system's terms. And it always will. By the time the morning routine ends, inmates have already been reminded multiple times that control here is not situational. It is permanent. The day has barely started, and autonomy is already gone. And as the hours move forward, the system tightens its grip in ways that are less visible, but far more lasting. In the outside world, movement is so natural that most people never think about it. You stand up. You walk. You turn left or right. You decide where to go next without permission. Inside a U.S. maximum security prison, movement is not a right. It is a temporary allowance, granted in controlled doses, and taken back just as easily. After the morning routines settle, the prison does not open up. It fractures. Different units begin moving at different times. Some remain locked down entirely. Others release inmates in small groups, under escort, for specific purposes only. Nothing is simultaneous. Nothing overlaps unless the system allows it. This separation is deliberate. Maximum security prisons are designed to prevent uncontrolled interaction, and the easiest way to do that is to control space. Movement here follows one rule above all others. You never move alone. Even inmates classified as compliant are rarely allowed to walk freely. Escorts are common. Handcuffs are routine. In some facilities, inmates must walk with their hands behind their backs even when uncuffed, a posture that signals submission and reduces perceived threat. Hallways are narrow, corners are blind, and doors are placed to funnel movement in predictable lines. Every step has a reason. Routes between cells, work areas, medical units, and recreation spaces are carefully planned to avoid contact between incompatible groups. Rival affiliations. Conflicting classifications. Inmates with disciplinary restrictions. Everyone is mapped into the building like pieces on a board. The architecture itself enforces separation, and inmates feel it. Movement inside a maximum security prison is rarely quiet. Doors buzz. Gates slide open and slam shut. Chains rattle. Radios crackle with codes and confirmations. Even when no one is speaking directly to you, the environment reminds you that nothing happens without authorization. A single unauthorized movement, stepping out too early, turning the wrong way, hesitating at a doorway, can escalate quickly. Officers respond not because the act itself is dangerous, but because loss of control over movement threatens the entire structure. This is why compliance is demanded even when rules seem arbitrary. Inmates quickly learn that asking why leads nowhere. The answer is often policy, or safety, or simply that's how it is. Over time, curiosity fades. Survival requires acceptance. For inmates assigned to work details, movement becomes conditional labor. Kitchen workers may leave their cells earlier than others. Maintenance crews may move through restricted areas. But these privileges come with expectations. One mistake, one infraction, and the assignment disappears. With it goes the limited freedom that came from leaving the cell. Work is not just about productivity. It is about behavioral leverage. Maximum security prisons use work assignments to reward compliance and punish resistance without appearing overtly punitive. Lose your job, and you lose movement. Lose movement, and your world shrinks back to concrete walls. For inmates without work assignments, the day stretches endlessly. Hours pass inside cells with little stimulation. Some facilities allow limited out-of-cell time for showers or brief recreation. Others restrict movement almost entirely, especially for inmates classified as high risk or under disciplinary sanctions. Even recreation, when permitted, is tightly controlled. Recreation yards in maximum security prisons are rarely open spaces. They are enclosed areas surrounded by fencing, cameras, and towers. Time slots are short. Groups are small. Weather rarely changes the schedule. In some facilities, recreation happens indoors, inside cages or concrete enclosures that allow movement without contact. The message is consistent. Movement is allowed only under observation. Over time, inmates adapt physically and mentally to this restriction. Muscles weaken. Energy declines. Motivation fades. The body learns to conserve energy because movement opportunities are unpredictable and limited. The mind adjusts too, lowering expectations. This adaptation is dangerous and effective. Studies of long-term incarceration show that restricted movement contributes to depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. But from an institutional perspective, it also reduces impulsive behavior. People with less energy fight less. They react slower. They comply more readily. Control doesn't require aggression when exhaustion does the job. Another layer of control comes from unpredictability. Movement schedules change without notice. Recreation may be canceled due to staffing shortages, security alerts, or unrelated incidents elsewhere in the facility. Inmates often learn about cancellations only when doors fail to open. There is rarely an explanation. This unpredictability keeps inmates off balance. Planning becomes difficult. Hope becomes cautious. Expectations are lowered to avoid disappointment. Over time, many inmates stop anticipating movement altogether. It's easier to assume nothing will happen than to be let down repeatedly. That resignation is powerful. Movement restrictions also shape social dynamics. Limited contact means relationships develop slowly, if at all. Conversations are brief. Interactions are monitored. Trust is rare. Isolation deepens even when others are physically nearby. Inmates may hear voices through walls or vents, but face-to-face contact is minimal. Over time, the human presence becomes abstract. People exist as sounds, not faces. This erodes empathy and reinforces emotional distance. The prison does not need to enforce silence explicitly. Restricted movement does it naturally. Medical movement is no exception. Trips to medical units are often delayed, rescheduled, or canceled due to staffing or security priorities. Inmates learn quickly that their health concerns rank below institutional control. Complaints are processed slowly. Appointments are brief. Privacy is limited. Even vulnerability is regulated. Religious services, educational programs, and counseling sessions, when available, follow the same rules. Attendance depends on classification, behavior, staffing, and space. Access is conditional. Nothing is guaranteed. This constant negotiation for movement reinforces dependency. Inmates begin to internalize the idea that freedom, even in its smallest forms, must be earned daily. One wrong word, one misunderstood gesture, one bad day can erase weeks or months of compliance. And yet, resistance rarely brings relief. Those who challenge movement restrictions often find themselves further isolated, placed in segregation, transferred to higher control units, or subjected to additional monitoring. The system absorbs resistance and responds with tighter control, not dialogue. By the end of the day, most inmates have moved far less than they expected. Steps are counted unconsciously. Muscles ache from inactivity. Minds feel dulled. The cell waits, unchanged, patient. Movement without freedom is one of the most effective tools of control inside maximum security prisons. It reminds inmates constantly that space is not neutral. Every inch belongs to the institution. Every doorway is a boundary. And as the day continues, the system tightens its hold not just on bodies, but on communication, deciding who can speak, who can listen, and who must remain unheard. In a U.S. maximum security prison, communication is never free. Words move through filters. Conversations exist under conditions. Even silence is monitored. The system does not just control where inmates go. It controls what they are allowed to say, hear, and express, and just as importantly, when they are allowed to do it. From the moment inmates enter a maximum security facility, they learn a rule that is never written down but universally understood. Everything you say can be used to measure you. Phones are recorded. Mail is screened. Visits are monitored. Conversations on the tier are overheard. Even body language is observed. Communication becomes risk management. Inmates begin weighing every sentence, every reaction, every word spoken within earshot of authority. And eventually, many choose silence. Silence is safer. In common areas, inmates speak quietly or not at all. They learn which officers tolerate casual conversation and which interpret it as suspicious behavior. They learn when talking draws attention and when it fades into background noise. Over time, communication becomes strategic rather than natural. This is not accidental. Maximum security prisons are designed to flatten expression. Verbal communication inside these facilities is treated as a potential security threat. Conversations can signal planning. Information can travel. Relationships can form. Influence can grow. To prevent that, the system limits communication pathways and monitors those that remain. Phones, when permitted, are restricted by time, frequency, and approved contact lists. Calls are often limited to a few minutes. Automated voices remind inmates that the call is being recorded. That reminder isn't just for legal reasons. It is psychological. It reinforces self-censorship. Most inmates do not speak freely on recorded lines. They avoid discussing grievances. They avoid criticizing staff. They avoid sharing emotional vulnerability. Conversations become shallow, practical, surface level. Everyone's fine. Nothing much happening. I'm good. Real thoughts stay inside. Mail operates the same way. Letters are opened. Read. Sometimes delayed. Sometimes rejected. Entire paragraphs may be blacked out or withheld without explanation. Inmates learn that writing honestly can carry consequences, not always immediate, but always possible. Over time, Many stop writing altogether. Visits, when allowed, are tightly controlled environments. Physical contact is limited or eliminated. Conversations happen under observation. Officers stand within earshot. Cameras record expressions. Families learn to avoid sensitive topics. Inmates learn to perform calmness. Even moments meant to maintain human connection are structured to reinforce distance. Inside the housing units, communication between inmates is constrained by architecture. Cells are separated by walls and steel doors. Voices travel through vents, cracks, and plumbing. Conversations become fragmented, misunderstood, stripped of tone. People become voices, not faces. This lack of direct interaction changes social dynamics profoundly. Trust erodes. Relationships remain shallow. Rumors spread easily because verification is difficult. Isolation grows even in crowded environments. The system benefits from this fragmentation. When inmates cannot communicate easily, organizing becomes difficult. Complaints stay individual. Resistance stays isolated. Solidarity weakens. Control strengthens. Surveillance fills the gaps. Cameras are everywhere: corridors, day rooms, yards, entrances. Some are obvious. Others are intentionally subtle. Inmates are rarely told where cameras are placed, which feeds uncertainty. The assumption becomes that everything is watched. Even when cameras aren't present, the behavior remains. This is one of the most effective aspects of surveillance-based control. Visibility does not need to be constant to be effective. The possibility of being watched is enough. Inmates regulate themselves to avoid drawing attention. Movement slows. Gestures shrink. Expressions flatten. Over time, surveillance becomes internalized. Inmates begin monitoring themselves even when alone. They avoid behaviors that once felt normal: talking to themselves, pacing energetically, expressing emotion. The fear is not always punishment. Sometimes it is classification review. Sometimes it is increased monitoring. Sometimes it is nothing at all, just the awareness that visibility carries risk. This constant self-monitoring is mentally exhausting. Psychologists describe this as hypervigilance, a state where the brain remains on alert even in the absence of immediate danger. Over long periods, hypervigilance drains emotional energy, disrupts sleep, and dulls cognitive function. But from an institutional perspective, it works. Inmates who are tired, quiet, and cautious are easier to manage. Silence inside maximum security prisons is not empty. It is dense, heavy, filled with unspoken rules and suppressed reactions. The absence of sound does not mean calm. It means containment. Even emotional expression is regulated. Laughing too loudly draws attention. Anger escalates situations. Crying signals vulnerability. Joy feels risky. Over time, emotional neutrality becomes the safest posture. Many inmates adopt a flat effect, neither happy nor upset, as a form of self-protection. This emotional flattening does not stop at the prison gates. Former inmates often report difficulty expressing emotions long after release. Years of suppression do not disappear easily. The system reshapes behavior in ways that extend beyond confinement. Communication control also extends to grievances. Formal complaint systems exist, but they move slowly. Responses are delayed. Outcomes are uncertain. Inmates learn that filing grievances can label them as problematic. Even when retaliation is officially prohibited, consequences can appear subtly: changes in housing, loss of privileges, increased scrutiny. As a result, many choose silence over process. This silence is interpreted by the system as stability. But it is not peace. It is pressure held inward. By controlling communication, maximum security prisons limit not just information flow, but identity itself. People define themselves through expression, through words, relationships, shared experiences. When those are restricted, identity begins to shrink. Inmates stop explaining themselves, stop narrating their lives, stop imagining futures aloud. Thoughts become internal, isolated, unchallenged. And this is where control reaches its deepest level. A system that controls communication controls perception. It shapes how people understand their environment, their options, and themselves. Without dialogue, reality narrows. Possibility fades. Silence becomes normal. Surveillance becomes background noise. And the system continues operating, not through force, but through quiet compliance. As the day moves forward, the prison does not grow louder. It grows stiller. Communication tapers off. Energy drains. And the next phase of control begins, one that operates through routine deprivation and conditional reward. By the time afternoon settles inside a U.S. maximum security prison, the system no longer needs to assert itself loudly. Control has already been established. Movement has been limited. Communication has been filtered. Now the prison shifts into one of its most effective and least visible tools, routine deprivation. This is where punishment becomes quiet. Contrary to popular belief, most days inside a maximum security prison are not filled with confrontation or crisis. They are filled with waiting. Long stretches of time with nothing to do, nowhere to go, and no one to speak to. The absence of stimulation is not accidental. It is engineered. Human beings are not designed for prolonged inactivity combined with constant alertness. The mind needs variation. The body needs movement. Emotion needs expression. Remove those elements slowly, consistently, and without explanation, and resistance weakens on its own. This is how routine becomes punishment. After midday count, many inmates return to their cells, not because the day is over, but because there is nothing else scheduled for them. Work assignments and early programs are limited or non-existent. Recreation may have already happened, or it may be canceled entirely. The cell becomes the default setting. Hours stretch. Inside a cell, time behaves differently. There are no natural markers to break the day apart. Lighting remains constant. Temperature rarely changes. Sounds repeat endlessly. Doors, footsteps, distant announcements. Without variation, the brain struggles to track progress. Minutes feel longer. Thoughts loop. This mental stagnation is one of the most damaging aspects of long-term confinement. Inmates often describe afternoons as the hardest part of the day, not because something happens, but because nothing does. The morning at least has structure. The evening leads to count and lights out. Afternoon sits in the middle, unanchored and empty. Boredom here is not casual. It is oppressive. Many inmates attempt to fill time through reading, writing, or exercise. But access to materials is limited. Books are scarce. Writing supplies can be restricted. Exercise is confined to small spaces with minimal equipment. Over time, even these coping mechanisms lose effectiveness. Repetition dulls everything. Push-ups feel the same. Pages blur together. Words lose urgency. The mind drifts, then stalls. This is when deprivation becomes psychological. Maximum security prisons rarely deny everything at once. Instead, they ration comfort in small, controlled amounts. A radio may be allowed, but only certain channels. A television may be available, but programming is limited. Commissary items exist, but quantities and choices are restricted. Each item becomes a privilege rather than a baseline. And privileges can be taken away. Small infractions, talking back, failing to follow instructions precisely, possessing unauthorized items, can result in loss of commissary, loss of recreation, or loss of personal property. These punishments may seem minor from the outside, but inside they carry weight far beyond their appearance. When your world is already small, losing even one item matters. This creates a constant calculation in the inmate's mind. Is speaking worth the risk? Is complaining worth the consequence? Is asserting dignity worth losing what little comfort exists? Most decide it is not. Waiting becomes the dominant activity. Waiting for meals. Waiting for count. Waiting for doors to open. Waiting for letters. Waiting for visits. Waiting for release dates that feel unreal. Waiting without control over the outcome erodes motivation. The brain adapts by lowering expectations. Hope becomes dangerous because disappointment hurts more than numbness. So numbness becomes survival. Routine reinforces this numbness by refusing to change. Days blend together. Events lose significance. Even punishment loses impact because everything already feels restricted. This emotional flattening is not accidental. It is an emergent property of the system. By afternoon, many inmates are mentally exhausted without having done anything physically demanding. Decision fatigue sets in. Concentration weakens. Irritability rises, but expression remains suppressed. This internal tension has nowhere to go. Occasionally, the system disrupts routine deliberately. A sudden cell search. An unscheduled lockdown. A canceled meal. These interruptions remind inmates that even monotony is conditional. Control can tighten further at any moment. Uncertainty keeps people compliant. Lockdowns are particularly effective. Entire units may be confined to cells for hours or days due to incidents elsewhere in the facility. Inmates often receive little explanation. They are told to wait, and they do. During lockdowns, access to showers, phone calls, recreation, and commissary may be suspended. Meals may be delayed or served cold. Lights may remain on longer than usual. Sleep becomes difficult. The message is subtle but clear. Comfort depends on order. Over time, inmates internalize this logic. They begin viewing compliance not as submission, but as practicality. Fighting the system rarely produces relief. Endurance does. This is how punishment becomes invisible. There is no shouting, no spectacle, no dramatic force, just repetition, deprivation, waiting, a slow narrowing of life until only the essentials remain, and even those feel conditional. Mental health suffers in this environment. Rates of depression, anxiety, and emotional detachment are high in maximum security facilities. But treatment options are limited. Counseling sessions are brief. Medication is tightly controlled. Requests may take weeks to process. Even suffering must follow procedure. Many inmates stop reporting distress altogether. It feels pointless. Complaining risks attention. Attention risks consequences. Silence feels safer. The system interprets this silence as stability. By late afternoon, energy levels are low. Conversations are minimal. Movement slows further. The prison grows quieter, not because peace has been achieved, but because resistance has been worn down. Routine has done its work. As evening approaches, the day does not build toward closure. It collapses inward. The final phase of control is approaching, one that reinforces everything learned throughout the day. Obedience is rewarded with rest, and rest is conditional. As evening approaches inside a U.S. maximum security prison, there is no sense of winding down in the way the outside world understands it. There are no personal plans, no choices about how the night will be spent, no freedom to decide when the day is finished. Instead, the system prepares for its final act of control, lockdown. This is the moment when the prison reasserts ownership over the body one last time before sleep. Dinner is served early, often long before hunger naturally sets in. Trays arrive through slots or during brief, tightly managed movement windows. The food is familiar, repetitive, and eaten quickly. There is no lingering, no conversation, no atmosphere. Meals are functional, not social. Once dinner is complete, movement narrows even further. Doors begin to close across the facility in a carefully coordinated sequence. Units lock down one by one. Inmates are ordered back to their cells, sometimes with little warning. Anyone out of place risks immediate discipline. The tone changes subtly. Officers speak less. Radios become more active. Procedures tighten. Evening count is approaching. This count is different from the morning. Morning count wakes you. Evening count confines you. Inmates are required to be present, visible, and compliant, often standing in the same positions as earlier in the day. By now, most have learned the routine well enough to perform it automatically. That automatic compliance is the point. By the end of the day, the system no longer needs to push. It simply observes. Inmates move when told, stand when told, wait when told. The rhythm of control has already been absorbed. Once count clears, doors stay closed. Cells become the final boundary. Whatever movement happened earlier is gone. Whatever communication was possible fades. The world contracts again to concrete, steel, and limited space. This is where the psychological weight of the day settles. Lights do not always go out immediately. In many maximum security facilities, lighting is reduced, but not eliminated. Dim fluorescent light remains. Some cells are never fully dark. This serves multiple purposes: security, observation, and subtle disruption of natural sleep cycles. Darkness allows privacy. Privacy allows unpredictability. So darkness is limited. Sleep inside maximum security prison is rarely deep. The body is tired, but the mind remains alert. Sounds echo unpredictably. Doors slam. Officers conduct random checks. Radios crackle. Lights flicker. Even when nothing happens, the expectation that something might keeps the nervous system active. This constant low-level alertness is exhausting. Inmates often lie awake replaying the day, not dramatic moments, but small interactions. Did that comment sound wrong? Did that look draw attention? Did compliance come fast enough? The system teaches people to analyze themselves constantly, even when alone. This self-monitoring does not shut off at night. For many, nighttime is when thoughts become loudest. Isolation removes distraction. The future feels distant. The past feels heavy. Time stretches again. Sleep arrives in fragments. And yet, morning will come the same way it always does. This repetition is one of the most powerful aspects of control. There is no emotional closure to the day, no sense of accomplishment, no resolution. Each day ends unfinished, and each morning begins without reference to the last. The system does not care how yesterday felt. Over months and years, this cycle reshapes behavior. Inmates stop measuring progress emotionally. They stop expecting change. Survival becomes about enduring the present moment without drawing attention. Hope becomes muted. This is why many people misunderstand life inside maximum security prison. They look for breaking points, riots, violence, visible rebellion. But the system is designed to prevent dramatic collapse. Instead, it produces slow adaptation. People do not break loudly. They adjust quietly. By the time lights dim, most inmates are not thinking about resistance. They are thinking about rest, about avoiding trouble, about getting through the night without incident. Control no longer feels imposed, it feels normal. That normalization is the system's greatest success. The day has been fully engineered, from wake-up count to lockdown, to shape behavior without constant force. Every phase reinforces the same lesson. Compliance reduces friction, resistance increases suffering, and time belongs to the institution. Tomorrow will be the same. Not because inmates lack imagination or strength, but because the environment rewards predictability and punishes deviation. Over time, the safest path becomes the narrowest one. And so the cycle continues. Wake-up count, movement without freedom, filtered communication, routine deprivation, lockdown and lights out. Not once, not occasionally, but every single day. This is how maximum security prisons maintain order. Not through chaos, but through structure. Not through constant violence, but through constant control. And not through fear alone, but through exhaustion, repetition, and normalization. By the time sleep finally comes, shallow, fragmented, and uncertain, the system has already won the day. By the time the lights dim inside a U.S. maximum security prison, there is nothing dramatic left to show. No final confrontation, no closing argument, no moment of release. That is because the real work of control has already been done, quietly, methodically, and without spectacle. What you've seen throughout this documentary is not a system built around constant violence or fear in its loudest form. It is something far more effective. A structure that operates through routine, through repetition, through the slow removal of choice until compliance feels less like surrender and more like survival. From wake-up count to lockdown, every hour of the day is engineered to send the same message. Your life here belongs to the system. Time is not yours to manage. Space is not yours to claim. Speech is not yours to use freely. Even rest is conditional. And that is the part most people outside these walls never fully understand. Maximum security prisons do not rely on chaos. They rely on predictability. They do not need constant force, because force is expensive. Instead, they use structure to do the work quietly. Architecture replaces aggression. Schedules replace shouting. Uncertainty replaces explanation. Over time, inmates adapt, not because they agree with the system, but because adaptation is the only way to endure it. Resistance becomes costly. Silence becomes safe. Routine becomes reality. This is how control stops feeling imposed and starts feeling normal. And the effects don't end at the prison gate. Many people who leave these facilities carry the structure with them. The hypervigilance, the flattened emotions, the instinct to wait for permission even when none is required. Years of engineered routine do not disappear overnight. The system reshapes behavior long after confinement ends. Understanding this matters. Not to excuse crime, not to romanticize prison, but to see the reality clearly. Because when we talk about punishment, we rarely talk about what it actually looks like day after day. We talk about sentences and security levels. We talk about walls and fences. But the real punishment lives in the hours, in how time is taken, how choice is narrowed, and how identity is slowly compressed into routine. A normal day inside a maximum security prison is not ordinary at all. It is a carefully managed environment designed to control behavior without constant force, to produce compliance without explanation, and to maintain order through exhaustion and repetition. That is the hidden reality behind the walls. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.